And they didn't care, what level of force was used or what cost was involved. They just wanted it gone. It was becoming an embarrassment for the Prime Minister and his image, both in Canada and around the world.
There was no national emergency, but it's hilarious. If that was happening in Winnipeg or in Edmonton, the feds never would have gotten involved, but it was on a home ice.
So far, no one from the federal, provincial, or municipal government has spoken directly with us. Instead, they are using you, the media, to portray us as racists, misogynists, and even terrorists.
Those people are putting us all at risk. Those people, small fringe minority,
qui croient pas dans la science, qui sont souvent misogynes, souvent racistes.
There's a pretty good chance. Well, I think it's inevitable at this point. But I'll probably be going somewhere tomorrow where I'll be getting 3 square meals a day. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. And I want you to know that I am not afraid.
I'm heading out on this traveler's road, and I won't find peace till the day we rest in harmony. Tell me what's so wrong if I choose to disagree. We're taking Highway 1 till we're living free. Fighting till we're living free. Oh, standing in unity.
Met any of these people before?
No, never.
Had you at any time heard about Ms. Leach?
Yes, I heard about her, but only in the context of the Freedom Convoy. Anything else I learned about Ms. Leach, I'm pretty sure I Googled her as soon as I was starting to watch the convoy form, so this would be in, late January. The process some people have said, why didn't so-and-so who was involved with Coventry, which was one of the protest locations, testify, or why didn't this person be asked to testify, and so on. We had actually, our legal team had put in a list of 26 different witnesses that we thought the commission needed to hear from, including Dean French, including the clan mothers from the Aboriginal groups that played a very important role in coordinating and helping with the participation of so many First Nations peoples and from across the country. The commission decided who it was going to hear from. And it looks like what they were focused on is who did they see as the key players? Who did they see as the ones that were involved in most of the moving pieces? So they chose Tamara Leach, Chris Barber, and Danny Bulford, Tom Morazzo, and myself. Danny Bulford's a former RCMP officer. He at one time was stationed up in the Yukon, done everything from general duty RCMP work to investigating murders. Then he became a SWAT member and then moved his family to Ottawa and was a part of the Prime Minister's protective system at different times and was very concerned about the vaccine and was being forced to take it and resigned in the face of that. He focused heavily on, Danny did while he was there in Ottawa at the protest, on sort of the public safety aspects, following up on any reports of criminality, diffusing what were perceived to be undercover operations and potential stings or potential plants, as much as possible. Tom Marazzo is a former captain in the Canadian Armed Forces in the Army, and he's a logistics guy. He's used to dealing and planning for the movement of a mechanized armored division and infantry. And basically, what did you have on the ground? You had a mechanized armored division, which was all the big vehicles, and then you had the troops, which were the protesters. So he was heavily involved in logistics. Eva Chipiuk and I were the key counsel on the ground, lawyers. And then Tamara was, the figurehead of the whole thing. Chris Barber as well. Chris being a trucker with Big Red, his symbolic truck deckled out in the Canadian flags and freedom stickers and signs. So I think that's what they were trying to hear from. Tamara's a very organized person. She's done a lot of volunteer work for Habitat for Humanity, other charities, some political parties, and in terms of constituency association work. So she's a natural organizer in terms of helping people understand how they can be effective and what roles they can take in an event. So I think that's why they selected those witnesses.
What was your view on how the protest was portrayed in the media?
It was a negative light right from day one.
What do you think was being missed?
Everything.
And I think that the stand that the protesters took was very welcome by a lot of Canadians. We're generally known to be quite apathetic and agreeable, but at some point, enough is enough. And this is what these protesters that gave evidence at the inquiry, you really just saw that they wanted to do something for their country. They wanted to take a stand. They heard a lot of people were not comfortable. They heard a lot of families being divided, and these are really quite upstanding Canadians that wanted to help others out.
I was becoming increasingly alarmed listening to my Prime Minister call me a racist and say that I shouldn't be tolerated. I found his rhetoric to be incredibly divisive, and I'm a believer that if you're a leader of a country, you have to lead all of your people, even if you don't agree with them. And I just saw so much. Coming across Canada every day, I heard stories. People, at least 3 people would tell me they were planning their suicides until we started the convoy. Or stories of people that we were too late. I heard from families that were living in their vehicles because they'd lost their jobs. I heard from people that had lost their jobs and lost everything. I have the tears of thousands of Canadians on my shoulder who every day told me that we were bringing them hope. I saw little old ladies praying on their knees on the side of the road, and I saw little children holding signs saying, "Thank you for giving me back my future."
Tamara finally had a chance to speak at the inquiry because she hasn't been able to publicly talk because of the insane bail conditions that have been imposed on her for her alleged, what is it even called? Mischief. It's so hard to even think of the name because what did she do? Really, I still have a hard time understanding what the charges are about. All she did that I saw was preach, work with the police, don't do anything criminal, don't do anything that would get us in trouble, work peacefully with everyone.
The narrative that the Prime Minister and the federal government primarily were trying to create was so blatantly obvious that it became clear to everybody on the ground in Ottawa during the protests that the smartest thing they could do was stay calm, stay peaceful, stay focused on the themes of peace, love, and unity.
I was never, prior to this, a big believer, I didn't think they were a bad idea, but mission statements. It was remarkable how efficient everybody worked because they all had the same mission statement that they had formulated deep to the core of their being, was that they felt the country was badly off track, that their families and their communities were being harmed, and this was their opportunity to try and make a difference.
They all were there because they themselves had witnessed the harm of this unprecedented, arbitrary government public health policy of restricting 6 million Canadians from traveling, of forcing people out of their jobs because they were concerned about the effects of taking an experimental treatment.
It was everything. It was the restrictions, the restrictions from going into restaurants, from schools were shut down, all of those sorts of things. It just built up, and that was the last straw for you.
There's so many different stories that I've heard throughout this ordeal that contribute to why we went there. When you're hearing stories of people's parents dying in a hospital bed alone because mandates wouldn't allow their kids to be with their adults when they took their last breath. You've seen the mental health issues in this country just plummet. It was sad. I watched that with my own children. My daughter, it was 16 at the time, was unvaxxed in high school, bullied by the rest of her classmates because she wasn't vaccinated. She had to play a clarinet in music class in a separate room.
You have to understand, I didn't know any of these people at all. I didn't meet Tamara or Tom until, in person, until I got there. So got to know all these folks. I had read about them in the news. I thought they were going to be very different than they were. And by that I mean this, the news and the media had spun this as some sort of extremist adventure, some, radical anti-vaxxer, hateful people who are racist and everything. And you know what? I didn't have any reason not to believe the news. They're not racist. They're not homophobic. They're not white supremacists. They're not Nazis. They're not Confederate flag carrying Nazis. They're not Nazi flag carrying Nazis. Yeah, I got to know them, and I'd say, and the other clients, I'd say they're now also friends. I actually apologized to them at the end of the hearing. I didn't tell them at the beginning of the hearing that I actually believed this stuff I read in the news, but I said, listen, I owe you guys an apology. I did believe this stuff. I thought I was just doing my regular job where I'm representing somebody and trying to make a bad situation better. But it turned out it was all just a bunch of bullshit, to be quite frank. And Tamara Litch is a lovely woman. Is Tamara Litch a terrorist?
In terms of designating who is a terrorist and who isn't, that is not my job as Minister of Finance or Deputy Prime Minister.
Okay.
We have authorities whose job is to do that.
Right. And so it's not your authority to designate Tamara Litch, Chris Barber, Tom Marazzo, or Danny Boldford terrorists. That's somebody else has to do that.
Yes, we have intelligence services, we have enforcement agencies whose job is to determine who is a terrorist.
These labels, at least I think they hoped they couldn't be labeled with these outrageous names. But even no matter what they did, they still were labeled these terrorists or extremists because that's what it seemed like that's what the politicians wanted them to do.
Their records speak for themselves. They actually say they planned out that narrative from January 25th to January 27th, and then they carried it out. That's not debatable. They did that. The government did it. They can sit there on Twitter and pretend that they didn't, but their own emails and text messages say they did, and so do their actions. So there you go. I don't know what else to tell you. They had planned to do that prior to the protesters even getting to Ottawa, and that's just not debatable.
Emails from January 27, 2022 at 4:21 p.m. You can agree with me that the protesters in Ottawa didn't arrive here until the 28th. Is that fair?
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
All right. So they're already preparing the narrative that they're going to label the protesters with. Can you scroll down, please? And there I put this to the last witness as well. Our government recognizes and respects that everyone in Canada has the right to safe and peaceful protest. Threatening acts of violence and inciting hatred, as we have seen from a select few in recent days, is unacceptable and does not reflect the views of the majority of Canadians. We condemn all such hateful and violent rhetoric in strongest terms. So can you agree with me that that labeling of the protesters had already been set out on January 27th?
Sir, I don't know the context of this email or frankly where it comes from.
Okay, if we can scroll up. Okay, scroll up to the top, please. So this is with your chief of staff, and they're agreeing about how they're going to set the narrative for the protest.
They were painting that narrative and they wanted them to fall for that trap. And in fact, it never happened.
The crackdown north of the border tonight, police moving in to end the 3-week protest over COVID rules that has paralyzed the Canadian capital for weeks now.
Oh, shit! Freedom!
They just break the window.
Stay calm. Keep an understanding. Look at that.
Hey! Hey! Where's your kids? Where's your children?
I saw brutal violence on innocent people, and that's a couple seconds right there. It's something I didn't ever think I would see in Canada, especially as a lawyer and as a person. There's so many ways to address a situation and not resort to the kind of violence that we witnessed in Ottawa.
And in fact, you believed as a veteran, you should put yourself in the way of other protesters because veterans are better able to withstand what was about to come, you said.
I wouldn't say better able, I just said we're more accustomed to it. Most civilians are not ready to be beaten. I was ready for it.
At no time did the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, either en route or while it was in Ottawa, become an illegal protest.
They blocked the border. Really? Do you know how many, and I'm sorry, I'm not mad, but I've dealt with this in the judicial review. Do you know how many land border crossings by truck or car there are in Canada to the United States?
Probably 50.
Over 100.
I'm heading out on this traveler's road, leaving all behind to revive my soul. And I won't find peace till the day we rest in harmony. They tell me I'm the one to blame, so they cast their stones and put me to shame. share. Damn your lies, you are a master in disguise. Tell me what's so wrong if I choose to disagree. We're taking high